All right. Well, good morning, everyone, or afternoon, I should say. Thank you very much for coming to our webinar today. This is Introduction to EndNote. I will say this is adapted by a workshop from a workshop by my colleague Megan Bell, who's here at UAB Libraries. And if you have any questions as we go, please don't hesitate to ask. Um, so yeah, we'll just go ahead and get going. So what we're going to be covering today. Uh, Locations where EndNote libraries should not be saved. Perhaps weird that that's what's being covered first, but there's a particular reason for that. The files that EndNote needs, how to create a library, um, and so on and so forth. All right, so why should you use EndNote? Um, Given that y'all are all here, y'all have a need to use EndNote, I'm assuming, but EndNote is used very widely by researchers, particularly in the health science contexts. It lets you store references and full text articles from different databases in one place, lets you organize them and create and format in-text citations and bibliography. It will save you a lot of time. The more citations your project, your publication has, sort of the more time it will save. And you can also use it to do screening and things like that if you're doing like a review of some type, but there are better tools for that, but you can use it for that. Okay, so we do have a guide to EndNote Desktop. I should clarify, we are talking about EndNote Desktop today. That has the download instructions. So if you have not downloaded EndNote yet, the instructions are there. It also has video tutorials on all these different topics that you can see here as well. So how do you get the EndNote software? So go to UAB on the hub. You sign in with your Blazor ID and password. Search for EndNote. It will give you a both a serial number and the software code. Just be sure you don't close out of that window when you're installing it because you will need the software key. And then you just download and install it. Okay, so with EndNote, EndNote Desktop is computer-based, so you are downloading files of citations from databases to your computer, where you will then import those files into EndNote, and they're stored in what are called libraries. So a library is just essentially a database file of all the citations that you've added to it. So do not save EndNote libraries to a cloud environment such as UAB Box, Google Drive, iCloud, Microsoft OneDrive. Don't save them to a USB drive or a network drive. This will eventually corrupt or damage your library. Sometime in the past year, I had a chat question come in from a faculty member in UAB Medicine who had been saving citations to EndNote or EndNote library for like 15 years, had upgraded through all the various iterations. And without her knowledge, her EndNote was migrated to a cloud drive. So I helped her archive her EndNote library immediately and immediately put her in touch with EndNote tech support. She had something like 18,000 citations in her drive. The one time you can save an EndNote library to one of these locations, a cloud drive or a network drive or what have you, is if you do what's called archiving your library. I'll be pulling up EndNote later and I'll show you where that is. But essentially, you create an archived version of the library, and that file is safe to send different places and things like that. But your everyday EndNote library that you're working with, it has to be on a local drive on the computer you're using. Okay, so to create an EndNote library, after you install EndNote, it will ask you where you want to save your initial library. But when you create a new EndNote library, you just go to File and New, and then you select where your library is going to go. It will create .data and .enl files. You will need both of those for your EndNote library to function correctly. So just be sure to save them in a place where you're not going to move them around. You're not going to change the folder's location in your, you know, drive hierarchy or what have you. So just make sure wherever you save them, you just sort of leave them there. Again, unless you're archiving it and moving it somewhere else. So exporting citations from databases. So EndNote and downloading files with EndNote is definitely compatible with Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. Since it's the desktop, since we're talking about the desktop version, any web browser that will let you download files should be fine with it. And when you export the references from this database where you've searched, an import file will be created. So usually it will save in, your downloads folder or something like that. In your web browser, if you get a little pop-up telling you like you've just downloaded a file, like you can click that to import it into your EndNote library. So how do you export citations from PubMed? You go to PubMed, you run your search, and there are two ways you can do this. You can select individual articles that you want to export and then import into your EndNote library, or you can, when you go to send to citation manager and create file, you can choose the results you've selected, or you can do something like all results. And I'll just show you that really quick here. So y'all can still see my screen, correct? You can see my web browser.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just making sure. It always makes me a little nervous when the screen highlighting disappears. So I'm going to go to databases, going to go to PubMed. I'm going to search for something. Okay, so I've searched for diabetes mellitus here. Say I want to export these files. Let me go ahead and open my EndNote library. We'll just use this one. This is a library I use for showing things. So I've got these 5 items selected. I'm going to click Send to Citation Manager. I have the 5 articles I've selected. Sometimes you can send all results since there are over 500,000 results. PubMed won't let you do that, but you can export a couple of thousand results at a time. And then I'll click Create File. So you notice the download menu has popped up. So here's the file. I'm just going to click on it. And over here in EndNote, it has imported these 5 references that I have selected. I was really not looking at the years when I selected those. That's interesting. Okay, and so that is how you get citations out of PubMed and into your EndNote library. So depending on what browser you use, you may have different, pop-up. Goodness, I can't think of words today. Notification windows that pop up to tell you, what do you want to do with this file? Is this safe and that kind of thing. So if you're using Safari, your RIS file, it's actually not an RIS file. Your file will go to the downloads folder. EndNote must be closed, and you drag and drop the file from the downloads folder onto the EndNote icon on the dock. So I will say EndNote was originally created for PCs. It does work on Macs, but it's a little funny. It does things in a slightly odd manner sometimes. So comparing this to exporting citations from EBSCO databases, like CINAHL, Academic Search Premier, and so on like that. When you do a search, you'll notice in the menu at the top of the screen, there's a folder icon. And as you're in the results list, you click the folder icons to add those to that folder at the top of the screen. You then select the ones you want to export and just click export. You'll want to direct export in the RIS format and just click save. And again, you'll get these dialog boxes. And again, if in Safari, your RIS file will go to the downloads folder. So let's walk through that live to see what that looks like. So I'm going to go, for demonstration purposes, into CINAHL Plus. Run my search, get a bunch of results. So from the results page, if you want to export certain results, you will click these. You see the little folder, the blue folder icon with the plus sign on it here in line with the title. You're going to click on that. You'll notice the icon changes and changes color, and the folder icon at the top of the screen actually changes as well, and it shows you a little piece of paper in there. So you know you have items in your overall folder. Oops. You can click add to folder from there as well. But I will select a few articles, then go to the folder icon up here again, select all, and click export. Direct export in RIS format and hit save. So again, I have the pop-up. I'm using Firefox here. I have the .ris file. When I click it, I now have these 4 references that I have imported. So in library databases, there are usually several different ways to do the same thing. When you click on the title of the article, which takes you to the article record, you can add or remove from this folder here. You can also export individual articles. You can click the export button. I would click save. Now, if you want to export all the results from a CINAHL search, we saw in PubMed, you could do that from the same menu. With EBSCOhost databases, you have to go to Share and then Export Results, email a link to download exported results up to 25,000 results. ProQuest works similarly to this. You tell it, you would click on it, put in your email address, tell it you want it in the RIS format, and a few minutes later, you'll get an email in your inbox with a link to download the file. I would say most databases, a lot of databases will let you export citations, and you're looking for a button that will say export or send to or something like that. That the language is pretty standardized around exporting things out of databases. All right, let's talk about once you have your articles in your EndNote library, how do you organize them? You organize them by using groups. So in your EndNote window, when you're looking at your library, you have in the middle of the screen the articles that you have in whatever view you're looking at. You have the preview window on the right, and on the left, you have your navigation area. So to create groups, or you're going to create groups for, I don't know, however you really want to use them. Given how I use EndNote, I tend to use it when working on systematic reviews. So I tend to as this image would indicate, create groups based on what database the data was exported from. But depending on your use for it, you can create EndNote groups for different projects, different topics, different class assignments, what have you. It's really up to you and how your mind works when approaching organizing things. So whatever works. So you can click the group drop-down menu, create group, name it, and hit enter. So here, again, we have the drop-down, create group. I'm going to name it. And then to get, so these four, well, let's just say, so your most recently imported references are under imported references. So these are the four from CINAHL. And then you have recently added. I don't know offhand what it considers recent. It might be something like time related, or it might be more related to like if it's been added since the program has been opened on a whenever you're using it. But we have these 9 recently added citations. So to get them into a group, you can just click and drag them. So there's that one. I can also click one, hit Control A to select all, click and drag it over. So now we have these 9 articles, these 9 references in this particular group. So when you're exporting results and then importing them into EndNote, just make sure you're regularly adding them to whatever group you're working with, however you want to organize them. Because what you don't want to do is not do that, and then, here are 150 unfiled articles that have been, added at various times. So, you don't want to have just a big pile of citations that you're having to wade through. That kind of works against the purpose of this. Okay. Oh, and I will mention, so you have a bunch of groups here, and I mentioned how you want to organize it will depend on kind of how you approach your research and organizing it. There is another question of, should you just make one library or should you use multiple EndNote libraries? Again, that's sort of up to you. Starting out, I tried to use everything in one EndNote library, but as time has gone on, I have found that for me, creating an EndNote library for each project works better and kind of makes things less complicated. So, I have my folder of research projects, and then for each project, I have within there the project and then the EndNote library or libraries from that project. So, I mean, again, ultimately it's up to you and how you approach organizing things. Okay. So, output styles. Output styles control how references will appear in citations and bibliographies, or when using the copy formatted command. So, output styles are essentially the citation style you're using. So, it will EndNote. Trying to think of the best way to say this. There are EndNote plugins, which we will get to momentarily. And EndNote will support both parenthetical citation formats, EndNote formats, footnote formats. It will do your superscript numbers and things like that automatically. When you use the formatted reference, that is just and copy formatted reference, that's just the references for the bibliography. So if you use that, you'll still have to do the in-text stuff yourself. But we'll get to that in a second. And likewise, an APA format. parenthetical and uh, references page citations. So inserting citations, well, let's talk about the output styles. So I have just updated to EndNote 21. So this is how it will look like if you're on a PC. If you're on a Mac, it will look slightly different in the Mac fashion. Uh, but if you go to Tools and Output Styles, what you see here is going to look a little bit different because EndNote comes pre-populated with the most popular output styles. If you want to add additional styles to this drop-down menu, you have to go in the Style Manager. Where did it go? Okay, here it is. So the Style Manager is actually a small program that kind of piggybacks on top of EndNote. So you see here we have a ridiculously large number of citation styles that come packaged with EndNote. So you have all the common ones like, you know, MLA, APA, AMA, Turabian, so on like that. You have some styles, like a lot of journals, will have their own styles. So if you are preparing a manuscript for, say, aids and behavior, it will, well, to add the styles to that output styles drop-down menu, you just click the little box and it will add that style as an option, and it will also add it in the Word plugin, which we'll get to momentarily. Also, though, so EndNote has a little bit of a learning curve, and that's partly because of how powerful it is and how much it can do. So, for example, say, I don't know, the Journal of Cell Biology, which you're submitting to, has slightly tweaked how it wants things. You can go into edit and you can edit all this stuff about this style. Like quite frankly, it's kind of silly how customizable EndNote is. But you don't really have to get that deep in there. You just tell it like, hey, I want MLA in the dropdown. You just click that box and then close it. And then under output styles, there's MLA now. All right. In terms of inserting citations into a Word document, there is a plugin called Cite While You Write that when you install EndNote on your computer, it will automatically install the EndNote plugin with Word. On a Mac, if you can't find Cite While You Write, you may have to manually add it as an add-in. So as you're working, the first thing you want to do is pick your bibliographic style. And as you're writing, you just get to a point where you want a citation. You click there, tell it insert citation. You find which one you want, and then you click insert. And there's some insert options there. In a Mac, or you can also do it from the EndNote side as well. So let me go ahead and show you all that. Okay, let me open up a Word document. As I'm doing this, does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, so here's a blank Word document. The EndNote plugin automatically updated, which is good. So in this bar, we have insert citation. If you click go to EndNote, it will pop up the library. I'll come back to edit and manage citations in a second. So I'm about to add a reference. So I type a sentence, say I want to add a reference right there. Insert citation. You have a window that pops up with a lot of options to pick from. You can search by author name for the one you're looking for. Say I wanted to add this one. I just click insert, and there is my parenthetical citation in APA format, and it has immediately created my reference page starting there. So I want to add some returns there and probably insert a page break to get it out of the way of what I'm doing. Again, insert citation there. And it automatically formats it and all that sort of thing. So from the EndNote library side, so I'm putting the cursor where I want it to go. From here, I can select the article I want to cite, click the Cite button in EndNote, and it automatically added it on the Word side and correctly slotted in where the article is supposed to go. So I'll be honest, it's pretty neat that it can do this, and I really wish I'd had some access to something like this in graduate school. Now, the trick with this is, oh, there we go. The trick with this is that EndNote accomplishes this by adding a lot of invisible code to your document. So if you're using Cite While You Write, do not edit or delete EndNote text within a Word document by using backspace or delete. So say you created your citation, you added your parenthetical citation, and you notice that there's something wrong in the citation, like I don't know, something is capitalized that shouldn't be, probably. Uh, you cannot edit that in your reference immediately. What you would want to do is go to your EndNote library, edit it there, and then back in Word, click Update Citations and Bibliography. Also, you should not backspace out a parenthetical citation once you've added, or an in-text citation once you've added it. You'll want to go to Edit Manage Citations. You'll click the one you want to remove and then click Remove Citation. So, for example, here in the Word document, Edit Manage Citations, say, oh, I shouldn't have put that last pro citation there. You can edit the reference from this side. Honestly, it's probably easier to do on the EndNote side, but I'm going to remove the citation. And it disappeared, and the citation disappeared from the reference page. So, at some point, you're using Cite While You Write, you will want to remove the EndNote code from your document. So, you know, as you're working on it, and as you're getting toward when you need to do a bunch of like maybe formatting, edits for submission to a journal or something like that, you may not want to kind of fool with using the drop down tools and things like that to do things, and you just want to go through and do stuff by hand. And if you're submitting to a journal, you'll probably need to remove the EndNote code first. So to do that, you click Tools and then Convert to Plain Text. After you select Convert to Plain Text, you'll be notified that a copy of your Word document is being created that's not linked to your EndNote library, and be sure to save it so that you know this one isn't linked. Right. So in Word, okay. So just to let y'all know, I do need to update the presentation a little bit because we're all sort of busy, and this is the first time I've had time to actually update EndNote. So I tell you what, rather than fiddle around with figuring this out live, when I send out this recording to y'all, uh, I will note how you save and format this with, oh, here we go. Convert citations and bibliography. So we're going to convert to plain text, continue without saving. Okay, so here it converted the document and removed all of the invisible code. So then I would want to go and save this document as the one that doesn't have the EndNote code in it. All right, so ultimately, how you work with EndNote, again, is really up to you. Uh, quite honestly, I get a little nervous about kind of accidentally destroying my document by backspacing without thinking about it. So I would probably do something more like, if I know all the citations I'm going to be using, putting them all in a group. Going to select all, APA is selected, copy formatted reference, and there are all my references. So, I mean, now you'll have to go in and, whoop, oh, it's still working through it. Do all the hanging indents and stuff like that. Um, and then do your in-text citations by hand. But again, that's up to you, what you're comfortable with and what works best for you. I'm not going to save that. Okay. Now, something EndNote will do for you as well is find full text. There is a built-in feature called find full text. You have to do a couple of steps to set it up. And one trick is it's not going to find all of the full text. Part of that is because what's happening is EndNote is communicating with uh, our server and our library databases. And if EndNote can see that there is a PDF or a link to a full text, it will download the PDF and attach it. If you want to set this up, you can go to, and I'll send a link to the EndNote guide as well. I'm going to go to Research Guides, EndNote desktop version, and under Save PDFs, there's a link that says Find Full Text. When you click on it, you'll go to Edit and then Preferences, and there is a preference for Find Full Text. Just follow these directions. You just have to copy and paste two links, and then click OK. So what happens, and I will actually double check this now since I updated it. You go to Preference, Find Full Text. We've still got the links, still got boxes checked and still got the links. Okay. All right. Say for these 9 articles, let's check and see what the find full text looks like here. So I'm going to go to References, Find Full Text. So it's going to ask me to authenticate. Yes, it's me. Yes, this is my device. Okay, don't worry about that. Just hit continue. Okay, and you'll notice under Find Full Text, it is now searching. Oh, okay, so it found that one. And whenever it says indexing PDFs, that just means it's found the full text of it and it is adding it. I'm really not surprised that it's, okay, so it's got the 2024. Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, so I'm not surprised that it found like the uh 18th and 19th century full text because those are all in the public domain. But it did find three of the articles that came out this year, the 2024 ones. Um, I will say just to make up a number, like it'll probably find, traditionally speaking, like 50% of your references. It hasn't been performing that well in the past year. We made some database changes, but like that is really promising. I'm going to have to recommend that my department update EndNote and see if that makes a difference. Anyway, so this can save you a lot of time. So it automatically saves and adds the PDF there. So you can read it through here. You can also save it, you know, uh, print to PDF, save it somewhere else on your computer to read it. But this way, you have all of your full text in one place in your EndNote. And when you archive, oh, I was going to mention that. Yes. So archiving a library to send it, you can archive a library so that it archives the PDFs with it. You're going to go to File, Compress Library, Create with File Attachments, All References, you just tell it where to save, and once that's done, then you can send it to a collaborator. You can save it on UAB Box or OneDrive or wherever you want to do that. All right, so for additional information, uh, we have these guides for EndNote and EndNote Online. And we'll say if you've downloaded EndNote 21, there is something called EndNote Web, which is, I think, their new response to EndNote Online. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, and I don't think any of my colleagues have either. So it is very possible that they've addressed the fact that EndNote Online is pretty terrible, and doesn't work well with EndNote Desktop. So that's very hopeful. Of course, you can always chat in if you want help, want any assistance. And that is all I have to cover today. Does anyone have questions for me? Also, if you could take the instruction survey, I would very much appreciate it. So I see in chat. Come back. Oh, yes, certainly. So again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Y'all are very welcome to email me directly or email your library liaisons. But yeah, can I put the survey link in chat? Absolutely. Happily. Whoops. I can find my controls. There we go. I'm also going to stop the recording.